My name is Brian. I'm 32, and for the past 7 years, I've been the unofficial safety net for my entire family. I never thought of myself as someone who took care of everyone. But looking back, that's exactly what I've been doing. Whenever my younger brother Jason couldn't make rent, I covered it. When mom's car broke down, I paid for the repairs. When dad's consulting business had a slow month, I slipped him a few hundred just until the next client comes through. I never complained, not once. I told myself it was what a good son and older brother should do, help out when he could. And I could. I have a decent tech job, I live well below my means, and helping them never seemed like a big deal. Until last Sunday. We were all sitting in my parents' living room, mom, dad, Jason, and me, half watching a football game on TV. It was one of those lazy Sunday afternoons where the house smelled like coffee and the hum of the game was the only noise. Out of nowhere, Jason turned to me with this smug little grin and said, "So, Brian, where's your wife and kids?" "Oh right, you don't have any." Mom actually laughed. Dad chuckled under his breath. And Jason leaned back like he'd just delivered a killer punchline. I sat there for a second, stunned. Normally, I let stuff like that slide. Jason's always been the golden boy. Younger, more charismatic. The one who somehow turns every bad decision into a charming anecdote. I've heard my fair share of digs from him over the years, but something about the way he said it this time, with that smug little grin and everyone else laughing along, hit me harder than usual. I forced a smile and said, "Yeah, no kids." But inside, it felt like something snapped. The next few minutes were a blur of casual conversation and lighthearted jokes, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. I kept thinking about every time I'd bailed Jason out. Every time I'd gone without a vacation so mom and dad wouldn't lose the house. Every time I'd skipped something for myself so they could have what they needed. And here they were, laughing at me like I was some kind of punchline. When the laughter died down, I turned to Jason and, in the calmest voice I could manage, said, "Where's your money?" "Oh right, I've been supporting you, until today." The room went dead silent. Jason's grin faltered. Mom's eyes widened. Dad leaned forward like he wasn't sure he'd heard me right. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't yell, but the way I said it landed like a hammer on the coffee table. And that's when everything started to shift. For a few seconds after I said it, you could have heard a pin drop. It was the first time I had ever spoken to them like that. Not with anger, but with finality. Jason was the first to recover. He leaned forward, that grin sliding back onto his face, though it looked a little more forced this time. "Wow," he said, chuckling. "Touchy much?" "It was just a joke, Brian." Mom gave a nervous little laugh and patted my knee, like she was trying to smooth things over. "You know your brother, he's just teasing. Don't take it so seriously." I didn't answer right away. I just stared at Jason, feeling that hot pressure in my chest that I'd been ignoring for years. "A joke," I finally said. "Right." Dad shifted in his chair. "Look, Brian, we appreciate what you do for this family, but there's no need to get dramatic. Jason's young, he's just having fun. You can't expect him to be as responsible as you." That line, "you can't expect him to be as responsible as you," was like gasoline on a fire. I'd heard variations of it my entire life. Jason wasn't held to the same standards I was. Jason didn't have to get straight A's in school. Jason didn't have to pay rent when he moved back home after dropping out of college. Jason didn't have to do anything but show up, flash that charming smile, and the world bent around him. And apparently, I was supposed to keep enabling it. I didn't argue then. I just stood up, grabbed my jacket, and said, "I'll see you later." I didn't slam the door on my way out, but I wanted to. That night, I went home and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, looking over my bank statements. Thousands, no, tens of thousands, of dollars had gone to my family over the years. Rent for Jason, bills for my parents, emergencies that somehow never got paid back. I had brushed it off every time because I thought I was doing the right thing. But sitting there, staring at the numbers, I realized something. I had made it way too easy for them. The next week was quiet, but not in a good way. I got a couple of texts from Mom, "You okay?" And Jason didn't mean it, you know how he is. But I didn't reply. I needed space to think. By Thursday, I was starting to feel a little better, a little more grounded, when I got a call from Dad. "We need to talk," he said. I sighed. "About what?" "About the bills. The mortgage is due, and I know you usually cover the difference. You haven't sent anything this month." I felt that hot pressure in my chest again. "Yeah," I said slowly. "I'm not doing that anymore." There was silence on the other end for a beat, and then Dad said, What do you mean you're not doing that anymore? I mean, I said, that I'm done paying for everything. I'm done being the backup plan. I'm done being laughed at while I bankroll everyone else's lives. Brian, you can't just stop. Your mother and I rely on that money. That's the problem, I said. You shouldn't. He started to get angry then. I could hear it in his voice, that low rumble he used when I was a kid, and he wanted me to know I'd crossed a line. You're being selfish. This family has always supported each other. I almost laughed at that. Has it? I asked. Because I don't remember anyone supporting me. I just remember being told I had to take care of everyone else. Dad hung up without another word. That weekend, I got invited. Well, more like summoned, to Sunday dinner. I almost didn't go, but some stubborn part of me wanted to see what they had to say. When I walked into the house, I could feel the tension like a wall of heat. Mom was setting the table with extra force, like each plate had personally offended her. Dad was sitting at the head of the table, arms crossed, face like stone. Jason was leaning against the counter, scrolling on his phone like he didn't have a care in the world. Dinner started quietly enough, but halfway through, Mom finally said, Brian, we can't keep going like this. Your father and I have bills. Jason has his student loans. I cut her off. Jason dropped out of college. She blinked, surprised, but kept going. And you make more than enough to help out. You've always done it before. That was before, I said. Before I realized I'm the only one here actually trying to be an adult. Jason looked up from his phone then, smirking. Oh, so now you're better than us because you've got some money? I turned to him, my voice sharp. No, I'm better than you because I work for it. You sit around all day pretending you're figuring your life out while you burn through my paycheck. Jason rolled his eyes. Whatever. You're still single. Can't be that great of a life. That was the moment something inside me just settled. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Done explaining, done defending, done playing the role they had written for me since I was a kid. I put my fork down, looked around the table, and said, very calmly, I'm not paying for anything else. Not the mortgage. Not Jason's rent. Not the car insurance. Nothing. If that means you lose the house, that's on you. Mom gasped. Dad slammed his hand on the table. Don't talk like that in this house, he barked. I stood up. Then maybe I shouldn't be in this house. I walked out before they could stop me, my heart pounding, but my head clearer than it had been in years. The next day, the call started. Mom, Dad, even Jason, all leaving voicemails about how I was tearing the family apart, how I was choosing money over them, how I didn't understand the pressure they were under. I listened to every single one, sitting at my kitchen table again, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. But I could feel it coming, the next step. The moment when the pressure wouldn't just be words on a voicemail. The moment they would try to force me back into my old role. And when it came, I was ready. The voicemails kept coming all week, and by Friday, I had stopped even listening to them. I'd go through my day with my phone on silent, see the missed calls piling up, and feel a strange mix of dread and relief. Dread, because I knew something was coming. Relief, because for the first time in years I wasn't rushing to fix everything. But Sunday morning, I got a text from Mom that was short and direct. We're coming over. My stomach sank. I considered ignoring it, pretending I wasn't home, but I knew that wouldn't stop them. And sure enough, 20 minutes later, I heard a knock at my door, not a polite knock, but the kind that carries an unspoken message, open up. When I answered, Mom was standing there with that tight smile she used whenever she was pretending everything was fine. Dad was right behind her, looking grim, and Jason trailed in last, wearing a hoodie and looking like he'd just rolled out of bed. Brian, Mom said, brushing past me into my apartment. We need to talk. I shut the door and followed them into the living room, where they all sat down like they owned the place. We can't keep doing this, Dad said without preamble. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage now. The bank is calling. If you don't help us, we could lose the house. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. I told you. I'm done. Mom's face tightened. You're being unreasonable. This is your family's home. You grew up there. Yes, I said. And I'm not going to bankrupt myself to keep it because no one else is willing to step up. Jason snorted. You act like you're some saint. You make good money. It's not like you're hurting. Why not just do the right thing and help? Because, I said, my voice sharper than I intended, it's not help anymore. It's expected. You all sit around waiting for me to save the day every time, and I'm done doing it. For a moment, no one said anything. Then Mom took a deep breath, like she was steadying herself, and said, Fine. If you won't do it voluntarily, we've already taken care of it. I frowned. What does that mean? Dad reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folder, setting it on my coffee table. We went to the bank, he said. We co-signed your name on a home equity line of credit. The funds are already transferred. The house is safe for now. My stomach turned to ice. You what? Mom rushed to explain, her voice rising. We had to. They were going to start foreclosure proceedings. We didn't have a choice. Yes, you did, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You had every choice. And you chose to forge my signature. Jason spoke up then, grinning like this was all some kind of joke. Hey, look on the bright side. You didn't even have to lift a finger this time. It's like you're the hero without even trying. I stared at him, my heart pounding. Do you even hear yourself? You just admitted to committing fraud, with my name, and you think this is funny? Jason shrugged. It's just money, Brian. Relax. I couldn't sit still anymore. I grabbed the folder and flipped through the pages, my hands shaking. There it was, my name, my information, my forged signature, all tied to a loan I hadn't agreed to. Tens of thousands of dollars that I would now be legally responsible for. You had no right, I said, my voice trembling. None. Dad's jaw tightened. We had every right. This is about keeping the family together. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions for the greater good. I laughed, a short, sharp, humorless sound. The greater good? That's what you're calling it. You stole from me. You used my credit, my name, to bail yourselves out again. And you didn't even ask. Mom's eyes welled with tears. We didn't want to put that kind of pressure on you. You've been so stressed lately. I stared at her, stunned. So instead you just went behind my back? Jason leaned back on the couch, smirking. Honestly, you're overreacting. You've been carrying us for years. What's the difference if you do it one more time? And that was it. That was the moment something deep inside me went quiet. Not angry quiet, ice quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when you stop expecting anything to change and realize you have to be the one to change it. I closed the folder carefully, set it down on the coffee table, and looked at each of them in turn. Get out, I said. Mom blinked. What? You heard me. Get out of my apartment. Dad stood up, his face red. Don't talk to your mother like that. I said get out. I repeated, my voice like stone. They hesitated, exchanging looks, but something in my expression must have told them I wasn't bluffing, because after a moment they all got up and left. Jason was the last one out, and as he passed me, he muttered, "You're such a drama queen." I didn't reply. I just shut the door behind them and locked it. Then I sat down on the couch, staring at the folder like it might burst into flames if I looked away. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about trust. Trust they had shattered completely. And as I sat there in the quiet of my apartment, I realized something I hadn't let myself think before. They weren't going to stop. Not until I made them. After they left, I sat in my living room for what felt like hours, the folder still lying on the coffee table like some kind of cursed object. Every time I looked at it, my stomach knotted. The numbers glared back at me, the total amount of the loan, the interest rate, the payment schedule, and my forged signature, a mocking reminder that my family had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation over and over in my head. The way Mom had said, we didn't have a choice, like it was some kind of excuse. The way Dad had stood there, justifying it like it was noble. The way Jason had laughed, as if this was all some kind of entertainment for him. Around 2 a.m., I got up and went to the kitchen, made a cup of tea I didn't even drink, and sat back down at the table. The apartment was so quiet it almost hurt. I'd always thought of myself as close to my family, maybe not emotionally, but in terms of duty. I'd always been there when they needed me. And now? Now I felt like I didn't even know who they were anymore. The next morning, I dragged myself to work, but I was barely functional. My coworkers probably thought I was sick. I just sat at my desk, staring at my screen, clicking through emails without reading them. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened. By Tuesday, the voicemails had shifted from pleading to guilt-tripping. Brian, this is your mother. I can't believe you threw us out like that. Your father hasn't slept in 2 days. Jason is stressed out. We did what we had to do. You'll understand when you have a family of your own. That one hurt more than I expected. The implication that I wasn't a real adult because I didn't have a wife and kids, the same thing Jason had mocked me for, stung more than I wanted to admit. Wednesday, Jason texted me directly. Stop acting like a victim. You're fine. Just pay it and move on. I didn't reply, but by Thursday, the pressure started to feel unbearable. My chest was tight all day, my head pounding, my stomach in knots. I went to bed early but lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering how it had come to this. How I had gone from being the dependable one to being the enemy in the span of a week. That weekend, I drove past my parents' house just to see if it was still there. I don't even know why. Maybe to convince myself this was all real. The lights were on. Jason's car was in the driveway. Everything looked normal from the outside, but I knew better. Inside that house, they were probably talking about me, spinning the story into some narrative where I was the villain who had abandoned them. I didn't stop. I just kept driving, past the house, past the edge of town, until I ended up at an empty overlook where you could see the whole valley. I sat there for a long time, engine off, watching the sun go down. That was my rock bottom, sitting in the dark, alone in my car, realizing that the people I had sacrificed for, the people I thought I was protecting, had never really respected me. They saw me as a resource, not a person. A bank account with legs. I went home that night and made a decision. I wasn't going to fix this. Not this time. Not for them. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and started researching. I read everything I could about what to do if your identity is used without your consent. I called my bank the next morning and asked to speak with their fraud department. I explained what had happened, carefully, calmly, and asked what my options were. The woman on the phone was sympathetic but blunt. It was complicated. Because my name and information were used, and because it was my parents who had done it, this would involve police reports, legal filings, maybe even a court case. When I hung up, I just sat there, letting that sink in. If I went down this path, there would be no going back. My parents could get into serious legal trouble. Jason might finally have to face real consequences. And the entire family would probably never forgive me. For a moment, I almost backed out. I almost convinced myself to just pay it off and keep the peace, like I always had. But then I thought about Jason's smirk, about Dad's righteous anger, about Mom's tears, not tears of apology, but tears of guilt-tripping manipulation. And I thought about how I felt sitting in that car, staring at the valley, realizing how alone I was. No, they had made their choice. And now I was going to make mine. The next few days were a blur of quiet preparation. I pulled my credit report and locked it so no one could use my information again. I changed my passwords, updated my online banking security, and made an appointment with a lawyer. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not my coworkers, not my friends, not even my aunt who had always been the one relative I could talk to. It wasn't about revenge yet. It was about survival, about finally taking back control of my own life. But deep down, as I gathered documents and wrote everything down, I could feel something darker growing. A quiet anger, patient and steady, waiting for the right moment to strike. And I knew that moment was coming. Meeting with the lawyer was the first step, and it felt like stepping into a new world. Her name was Rachel, and she had the calm, measured presence of someone who had seen every kind of family drama you could imagine. I sat across from her in her office, clutching the folder my parents had left in my apartment like it was radioactive. "Brian," she said after going through the papers, "this is serious. What your parents did is not just unethical, it's criminal. Forgery, fraud, identity theft. You have every right to fight this." I nodded slowly, my chest tight, but not from panic this time. "I don't want to destroy them," I said. "I just want my name cleared. I want them to understand they can't do this to me anymore." Rachel leaned back in her chair, thinking. "Then we approach it strategically. We can send a demand letter first, formally notify the bank that you did not authorize this loan. It will trigger an investigation. That alone will put pressure on them. If your parents don't resolve it, we escalate legally." Hearing it laid out like that gave me a strange kind of clarity. For so long, I had felt like I was reacting to them, rushing to fix whatever disaster they created. Now, for the first time, I felt like I was ahead of them, like I had the upper hand. When I left her office, the air felt different, lighter. That week, I threw myself into work like a man possessed. I had been coasting for months, showing up, doing the bare minimum, going home exhausted from the emotional toll of dealing with my family. But now I had a purpose outside of them, and it showed. I finished a big project that had been sitting half done on my desk, stayed late a couple of nights to help my team hit a deadline, and by Friday, my manager called me into his office. "Brian, this is excellent work," he said, holding up the report I'd just finished. "I've noticed a real shift in you lately. Whatever's going on, keep it up." I walked out of that meeting with a smile I hadn't worn in months. For the first time, my life wasn't about just keeping my family afloat. It was about building something of my own. I started taking better care of myself too. I cleaned my apartment until it felt like a fresh start, stocked my fridge with real groceries instead of takeout, and even signed up for a gym membership I'd been putting off for years. Every evening, I'd go for a run or lift weights, feeling the stress bleed out of me one rep at a time. Meanwhile, Rachel sent the demand letter. The bank acknowledged it within 2 days, and just like that, things started moving. The loan was flagged for investigation. I got a call from the fraud department, this time not as the guy trying to figure out what to do, but as someone taking decisive action. This is exactly the right step, the representative told me. Once we verify the signature was forged, we can remove your liability. Hearing those words was like taking my first full breath in weeks. Of course, my family didn't take it well. Mom called crying. "Brian, how could you do this?" "The bank called us. Do you know what you're putting us through?" I listened calmly, then said, "Yes, exactly what you put me through." She went quiet after that. Jason sent me a string of angry texts, most of them saying things like, "You're ruining everything. And if the house gets taken, it's your fault." I didn't reply to a single one. Instead, I started quietly preparing for whatever would come next. I opened a separate savings account, moved some of my money into it, and set up automatic transfers to build it even faster. I updated my will and beneficiaries, something I'd never bothered with before, and even consulted a financial advisor. "Your situation isn't uncommon," the advisor said when I explained why I wanted to protect my assets. "A lot of people with financially dependent families don't realize they need to shield themselves legally until it's too late. You're doing the right thing." I walked out of that meeting with more than just peace of mind. I had a plan, and as the weeks went by, things kept getting better. I got a raise at work. Nothing huge, but enough to feel like my efforts were paying off. I started sleeping through the night again. The tightness in my chest eased. Even my apartment started to feel different. Warmer. Quieter. Mine. One Friday evening, I found myself standing at my window, looking out at the city lights, holding a glass of wine. And for the first time, I didn't feel that crushing weight of responsibility. I felt free. But under that freedom, something else was building. Not just relief. Not just peace. Something sharper. Because every voicemail from my parents, every passive-aggressive text from Jason, every attempt to make me feel guilty was fuel. And I wasn't just ignoring it anymore. I was collecting it. I started saving every message, every voicemail, every text. Rachel told me to keep a record of everything. And I did. Not just because it was legally smart, but because each one reminded me why I was doing this. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about drawing a line. About making sure they understood that if they crossed me again, there would be consequences. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't just going to stop them this time. I was going to make sure they never tried this again. By the time the bank's fraud investigation really got underway, I had already shifted into a different mindset entirely. The Brian who used to panic whenever his phone lit up with a family call was gone. I wasn't scrambling to put out fires anymore. I was quietly stacking the kindling, planning exactly how to light it when the time came. One Thursday morning, I got an email from the bank confirming they had sent handwriting samples and documents to a forensic analyst. The words "suspected forgery" were right there in black and white, attached to my case number. I forwarded the email to Rachel, who called me almost immediately. "This is good," she said. "It means the bank is taking this seriously. Once the report comes back, we can move to have your name removed from the loan entirely. And if your parents are smart, they'll refinance it themselves before it goes any further." "Do you think they will?" I asked. There was a pause, then Rachel said, "If they don't, they're going to find themselves in a very uncomfortable situation." I thanked her, hung up, and sat back in my chair, thinking. The old me might have felt a pang of guilt hearing that. The new me felt something closer to satisfaction. But it wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. I wanted to make sure they never put me in this position again. So I started digging, carefully, methodically. First, I checked the county property records. It turns out my parents' house wasn't just behind on the mortgage. They had a second lien on it from a personal loan they had taken out 2 years ago. I didn't even know about that one. The balance was high, the interest rate was worse, and if they didn't start paying it down soon, they were at risk of default. Then I pulled Jason's name in the public records database. What I found didn't surprise me, but it still made my blood run cold. He had 3 unpaid traffic tickets, a delinquent credit card account, and an eviction filing from an apartment he'd lived in last year. All public record, all sitting there like little time bombs waiting to go off. I wasn't going to use any of this yet, but knowing it gave me leverage, the kind they couldn't take away from me. Meanwhile, my lawyer put me in touch with a financial investigator she sometimes worked with. His job was to trace money and build a clear picture of where funds had gone in cases like mine. I handed over everything I had: bank transfers, old receipts, screenshots of Venmo payments, every line item showing just how much of my money had kept my family afloat. When he sent me the report 2 weeks later, I just sat there staring at it. In 7 years, I had given my family nearly $86,000. $86,000. It wasn't just the amount, though that number made my stomach twist. It was the pattern. The investigator had laid it out in a timeline, showing every payment and what it had been for. It was like looking at a history of every time I'd said yes to keep the peace, every time I'd swallowed my pride to be the responsible one. Rachel called me after reviewing it. "This is powerful," she said. "If it comes to court, this paints a very clear picture of financial exploitation. It shows a pattern, not just a one-time mistake." I thanked her and hung up, my mind already racing. I was starting to see the whole picture now, not just what they had done, but who they really were. And that made my next steps easier to plan. I spent the next few weeks preparing quietly, living my life on the surface like nothing was wrong. I kept excelling at work, even earning a spot on a big upcoming project that could lead to a promotion. I kept going to the gym, kept eating well, kept sleeping better than I had in years. And at the same time, I built a kind of dossier. I printed out the financial report, the bank's investigation emails, the county property records, even Jason's court filings. I put them all in a neat, organized binder and kept it in my desk. It wasn't about waving it in their faces, not yet. It was about being ready. The calls from my parents slowed down eventually, though they didn't stop completely. Mom left one voicemail that sounded almost rehearsed. "Brian, your father and I have decided to put the house on the market if things don't improve. We hope you understand we're under a lot of stress. We'd still like you to reconsider and help out, just until we get back on our feet." I didn't call her back. Jason, on the other hand, started getting more desperate. His texts switched from angry to pleading. "Bro, please, I need help with rent this month. Landlord's threatening eviction. You've got the money. Just one more time. I swear I'll pay you back. This isn't just about me. If I get kicked out, Mom will freak. You don't want to do that to her." I stared at that last one for a long time before closing my phone and setting it face down. I wasn't going to cave. Not this time. By the end of the month, I felt like a different person entirely. The anxiety that had once eaten me alive was now something sharper, a clear, steady resolve. I had the evidence, the legal support, the financial stability. For the first time in years, I felt like I had real power. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I was done waiting for them to make the next move. If they wanted to play games with my life, it was my turn to set the rules. The day I decided to act was quiet and sunny. One of those deceptively calm mornings where everything feels normal, almost peaceful, right before a storm. I got up early, made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table going through the binder one last time. Everything was there: the financial report, the forged loan documents, the property records, Jason's delinquent filings. It was more than just a stack of papers now. It was leverage. Rachel and I had spent weeks refining the plan. She didn't push me toward court, though she made it clear we had a solid case if we wanted to file. Instead, she suggested we give them a chance to correct it first, in writing, formally, in a way that put everything on record. "We'll draft a settlement letter," she said. "It'll demand they refinance the house and remove your name from any accounts within 30 days. If they refuse or ignore it, we escalate. But this way, you've shown good faith. And if we do have to go to court, the judge will see you tried every reasonable step first." It was exactly the kind of move I wanted to make. Calm, strategic, unshakable. The letter went out on a Monday. It was 3 pages long, clear and professional, outlining every instance of unauthorized use of my information and every dollar I had been forced to cover over the past 7 years. At the end, it stated in no uncertain terms: failure to comply within 30 days will result in legal action, including a police report for forgery and fraud, as well as a civil claim for financial exploitation. I didn't even have to deliver it myself. Rachel sent it by certified mail. All I had to do was wait. And wait I did. The first call came from Mom 2 days later. "Brian, what is this? We just got your lawyer's letter." "It's not a letter from me," I said evenly. "It's from my attorney. It outlines exactly what needs to happen next." "You can't do this to us," she said, her voice shaking. Do you have any idea what it will do to your father if this becomes public? Do you have any idea what it's done to me already? I asked. There was a long pause before she said, we'll talk about this at dinner. Sunday. Please come. I almost said no. But then I realized this was exactly the moment I had been preparing for. Sunday came, and I arrived on time, binder in hand. The house felt smaller than I remembered, cluttered, a little shabby, like the strain of the last few months had settled into the walls. Mom and Dad were waiting at the kitchen table. Jason slouched in a chair off to the side. Brian, Dad started, this is ridiculous. You're threatening to drag your own family into court. Over money. No, I said calmly, setting the binder on the table. Over fraud. Over 7 years of being used like a personal ATM. Over the fact that you thought forging my name was an acceptable solution to your problems. Jason rolled his eyes. Here we go again. I opened the binder and slid the financial report across the table toward them. This is every payment I've made for you since I was 25. Nearly $86,000. Rent, mortgage, utilities, car repairs, emergencies. I kept you afloat while Jason figured himself out, while you two kept taking out loans you couldn't pay, and I never asked for a dime back. Mom's face went pale. I took out the forged loan documents next and laid them on top of the report. But this is where it stopped being help and started being theft. Dad's jaw worked, but he didn't say anything. Then I looked at Jason. And you think this is all some big joke. You think you can keep calling me every time you run out of money and I'll just bail you out again. But here's the thing. I've got every eviction filing with your name on it, every unpaid bill, every delinquent account. I know exactly how deep you're in. Jason's smirk faltered. I leaned back in my chair, calm, steady. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to refinance the house and remove my name from the loan within 30 days. You're going to stop using my information for anything, ever again. And you're never going to ask me for money again. If you do, I file this binder with the court, and the three of you can explain yourselves to a judge. Silence. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice small. And if we can't refinance? I met her eyes. Then you lose the house. And that will be on you, not me. Jason muttered something under his breath, but one sharp look from Dad shut him up. I stood, collected my binder, and walked to the door. You have 30 days, I said, turning back one last time. Use them wisely. When I left, I didn't feel triumphant exactly, not yet. But I felt something better. I felt in control. And as I drove home, a strange calm settled over me. Whatever happened next, it would be on my terms. The 30 days that followed were quiet, unnervingly so. No calls, no texts, no guilt-tripping voicemails. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't lighting up with family drama every few hours. At first, it was almost disorienting. Then, slowly, it started to feel good. Peaceful. Like breathing fresh air after living too long in a smoke-filled room. Rachel checked in every week, keeping me updated on the bank's progress. 2 weeks in, she called with the news I'd been waiting for. The handwriting analysis came back. The signature was confirmed as a forgery. You are officially cleared of any liability for the loan. They'll issue you a formal letter in the next few days. I sat there at my desk, holding the phone to my ear, feeling something in my chest unwind. So that's it. That's it, Rachel said. From here, the bank will hold your parents responsible for the debt. Whether they refinance or not is up to them. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony, looking out over the city lights with a strange mixture of relief and anticipation. The weight I'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted. I wasn't just free, I was untouchable. And then the real fallout began. 2 days later, Mom called. When I didn't answer, she left a voicemail, her voice shaking. They called, Brian. The bank called. They said the loan is now solely in our names. We can't make the payments. Your father is talking about selling the house. I don't know what we're going to do. I listened to the message twice, then deleted it. I didn't feel smug, exactly, but I didn't feel guilty either. They had brought this on themselves. By the 4th week, the house had officially been listed for sale. I found out not from them, but from the property records I'd been quietly monitoring. They must have priced it low because it went under contract fast. The following Sunday, Mom texted me again. Dinner. One last time. Please come. I hesitated for a long moment before agreeing. Not because I thought they deserved it, but because I wanted to see this through to the end. When I arrived, the house was half empty. Boxes lined the hallway. Furniture was missing from the living room, and there was an air of something final in the air. Mom looked tired, older somehow. Dad was sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers in front of him, his jaw set. Jason was pacing, his hands jammed into his hoodie pocket. "This is what you wanted, right?" Jason said as soon as I walked in. "House is gone. We're screwed. Congratulations." I didn't rise to the bait. "No," I said calmly. "This is what you chose. I gave you 30 days to fix this without losing the house. You didn't." Mom sat down heavily, her eyes glassy. "We couldn't qualify for refinancing without you. We tried. We really did." I almost believed her. Maybe they had tried, but it didn't matter anymore. The point wasn't whether they had made an effort. The point was that they had finally been forced to carry the weight themselves. Dad looked up from the papers. "We'll have enough from the sale to pay off the debt." "Barely. After that, we'll rent for a while." I nodded. "Good. That's what responsible adults do. They live within their means." Jason snorted. "Easy for you to say. You've always had money." I turned to him, my voice sharper now. "I had money because I worked for it. Because I didn't blow it on vacations I couldn't afford, or max out credit cards, or ignore my bills until someone else had to pay them." Jason looked away, his face red. Mom's voice was small. "So that's it then? You're really cutting us off." I took a deep breath. "I'm not cutting you off. I'm just stepping back. I'm not your safety net anymore. If you fall, you fall. And you figure out how to get back up without calling me." Silence settled over the kitchen. It wasn't the tense, angry silence from before. This was something heavier. Acceptance, maybe. I stood, looking around the house one last time. The house I'd grown up in. The house I had fought so hard to save for so long. "You know," I said quietly, "I used to think it was my job to keep this house standing. To keep all of you standing. But maybe this was what needed to happen. Maybe losing it is what finally forces all of us to grow up." No one said anything. I walked to the front door, hand on the knob, then turned back one last time. This is the last time I'm coming here. The next chapter of my life doesn't include this house, or the version of me that lived in it. If you want to be part of that next chapter, it has to be on different terms. Equal terms. And with that, I left. Driving away, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. The house was gone, but so was the burden I had carried with it. For the first time in years, my future felt like it belonged entirely to me. When I got home, I put the binder back in my desk drawer. Not out of spite, not as a threat, just as a reminder. A record of where I'd been, what I'd survived, and what I'd finally walked away from. As I closed the drawer, I caught my reflection in the dark window and saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. I was smiling.